Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. This is episode 8 in the ongoing series dealing with the SHAKEDOWN Blogs, and the very next blog after the one dealing with the Mystery Mistress, which I dealt with in the live stream, thanks to all of you guys who participated in that, was this mammoth blog titled Christopher Watts, What Else Do We Know? And although it was logged or posted on the 24th, I would then go on to update it for the next 2-3 months. So basically what I would do is, if there was any news in the Chris Watts case, not just any news, but new information, things that we didn't know, I would then add it to this chronological record, right? And that would be a sort of a parallel coverage to what I was putting up on Shakedown. The difference was that this was acting like an archive. You could get it all in one place, but in a timeline, whereas the blogs were, to some extent, not necessarily always new information. Sometimes it was discussing information that we already knew or putting up information that we weren't sure about. But this particular blog was, for the first time, kind of an archive, chronological, comprehensive, dealing with everything that we knew. And I did do a series on this blog post, which I then transferred to Crime Rocket, and it became something that, was, I think it included 2 or 3 years worth of almost daily updates in one place. And so I did a series on YouTube under the title Christopher Watts, What Else Do We Know? And so I'll put a link to that playlist in the description. So for those interested, and this is all free for you guys to watch, there are 23 episodes in the What Else Do We Know series. The first 10 are under a black color-coded series of slides. The next 10, from 11 to 20, are under a white-coded series of slides, and then the remaining 3 are under a yellow-coded series of slides. I remember I was going to do something like 50 episodes, but I sort of got overtaken by other things that were happening. I eventually did another series dealing with the phone data review, and there was a lot of other content that was competing and people were more interested in. And so I was approximately halfway through the series when I just sort of left it and went on to other things. So in a way, it's something that still remains to be done, is the remaining about 50% of this particular series. So what I'm going to do in this episode, obviously I can't go through the entire archive in one episode. It would take, days to get through it all. But I'm going to kind of introduce you to it. I'm not going to go through everything. I'll just highlight some of the information just in the month of August. Obviously, it goes on throughout the remainder of 2018, then 2019, and 2020, and so on. So I'm not going to go through all of it. I'll just go through a little bit of August. And for those who want me to get to the point, just click on the link in the description and you can go and read all of that on your own time. And then you don't need to listen to this video. So obviously, in the context of this particular series, dealing with, the Shakedown blogs, but in retrospect, and, what do we know now, looking back, that we didn't know then, and, how has our thinking changed? It's quite interesting to go through this, but the idea isn't just to rehash what we know. It's to sort of look at what we know in a way and sort of test our knowledge and our ability to discern information as we got it, right? And I was thinking about this, I was making lunch a little bit earlier. I was making soup. It's pretty cold today, cold and overcast, ideal day for soup. But I was thinking about some of the YouTubers out there who tend to exaggerate things. Everything is salacious and sensational, right? And we tend to think of true crime. We tend to think in very black and white tones. Was that person honest or not? Is what they said true or not? Is that person trustworthy or not? But there are many other levels of honesty, and one of them is, do you exaggerate? Do you inflate information? Do you put a twist on things that you're saying? And I'm talking about you in your life, in terms of just ordinary information in your life. If you have an experience somewhere, you went on a holiday, you went to watch a movie, you went to see a friend, do you report on that? Do you provide information on that accurately, or do you also exaggerate it? Because it might be more entertaining for other people to listen to, but is it actually accurate? And if you take that line of reasoning and you put it into, for example, the coronavirus, what's very difficult to ascertain now is what is the appropriate level of caution. And the reason is because there are some people exaggerating, or it seems like they're exaggerating what they've experienced, or mocking or undermining certain aspects. Recently, Eric Clapton has said something about it. And then there are others who go sort of the other route. And so what everyone is struggling to figure out is what is actually the reality. And it helps if people are not exaggerating and what people are saying is trustworthy. But we live in a world that is full of exaggeration and full of exaggerators, right? And so the Chris Watts case is quite a good way to test our ability to look through things that are either exaggerations or distractions or not true whatsoever. When we dealt with Nicole Kessinger, there was the temptation to consider whether Chris Watts had other affairs, whether he was seeing men as well. And so that was an exaggeration. That was something that there was some basis in reality, in the sense that his accusers were saying certain things. But today it feels like that was an exaggeration. Do you agree? And if you say, no, I don't think it was an exaggeration, I think it was true, then my question to you is, ask yourself, are you someone who's prone to exaggerate yourself? And thus, are you someone who's more susceptible to exaggeration, to exaggerated reality? So as I said earlier on, I'm just going to deal with the month of August in this What Else Do We Know episode. And so I'm just going to highlight a couple. I mean, the month of August actually has 114 entries, if you can believe that. Just in really half a month, it was actually just a week, because I only really started reporting on it around about the 17th or 18th of August. So there was really just less than 2 weeks to deal with, and nevertheless there were 114 entries. So I'm just going to highlight a couple that stood out to me then and stand out to me now. The first one is the very first one logged here. Christopher was seen barbecuing by himself by a neighbor at 7:15 on August 12, the night before the incident. And so one of the things that I think that tends to support, I'm not saying it does, but is you have the absence of the children at this point, just in terms of you seeing Chris Watts running around, but you don't see the children. Where are they? Are they watching television? Has something else happened? And so it's not just that, it's also when Shanann texts him around about that time as well, asking him for photos of the children, he also doesn't comply. He complies whenever she otherwise asks him for photos, whether it's of parking or whatnot. But on this particular occasion, he doesn't. And one's got to ask, why is that, right? Then number 2, Shanann's flight was unexpectedly delayed by 3 hours. Fact number 4, on May 7th, the Watts family appeared in Strive magazine, the official magazine for Thrive brand promoters. Number 5, in the article, Shanann articulated how she turned herself inside out to make others happy. And she said, my role was as a caretaker and to make people feel better, yet I was wiped out. I was working 65 hours a week and was also taking care of my kids. I rarely got any sleep, but my passion for wanting more for my kids was stronger than anything else. Fact number 10, I'm not sure is actually accurate. It says the doctor's appointment was at 10. I'm a little bit fuzzy on that. I'm not sure if the reason for that mistake was because Shanann's watch was still set to North Carolina time, but ultimately that appointment should have been, I think, at 9 o'clock or quite close to 9 o'clock. And so, that there was an early error. Point number 14, a drone spotted a bedsheet in a field near the oil tanks. I know when I visualized that, I basically just visualized the ears of the bedsheet sticking out of the dirt. I didn't actually imagine that the entire bedsheet would be visible. I mean, who would imagine that? Who would imagine Chris Watts would have done what he did and then, gone to all the effort to go out to those obscure, remote, out-of-the-way oil fields and then leave the bedsheet from his bedroom, from his home, right out in the open. What a idiotic mistake. Do you agree? Point number 22, on July 31st, Shanann wrote enthusiastically on Facebook about her August plans. She said, I'm so excited about August. Girls and I fly home August 7th. I fly to Scottsdale August 10 to 12 for an amazing weekend with my Lavelle family. Gender reveal for baby Watts number 3. Our team is having lots of success, growth both personally and business. Several new friends starting their Thrive experience and lots of new promoters who decided to change their life. Lots of excitement, lots to be thankful for. And so in that disclosure, she's basically saying that she intended for the gender reveal to happen just after that weekend, and then look at what ultimately happened. Then there was the photo that emerged. This is fact 23 of the 114, where Michelle Greer took a photo of, I don't think she purposely took this photo, but she took a photo of the playground in Myrtle Beach, and you could actually see, you got a sense of what is really going on there. You got a sense of Shanann on her phone directed towards the kids, Watts sitting behind her, kind of ignoring everyone, not really sort of actively participating in this family reunion. The next snippet I want to highlight is 66, it's not really number 66, it's between 66 and 67. It's from an article that's no longer, I think it's behind a paywall now, but it was from the Daily Beast, and it was a really insightful article, an excellent article really, about Shanann and her husband, what kind of people they were like, and that came from Shanann's former boss, Gregor Law. I think he was from Longmont Ford. And what he said, how he described Chris Watts, was that he was very passive, not just passive, very passive. And he described Shanann as very aggressive with him. These are his words. Gregor Law would describe Shanann as aggressive with her husband, bossy, do this, do that, telling him what to do, dominating the relationship. And so this emerged as early as August, but of course if you said anything about that, then you were evil and victim blaming and unfair and all that kind of thing. But anyway, this is something that Gregor Law said very early on. Point number 88 has some highlighted text in red, and there's just a fascinating but pretty obscure interview from WRAL, which is a regional news agency, which has to do with advanced knowledge that Shanann and Chris were actually planning to separate. So you actually found out that prior to their supposed conversation on, very, very early in the morning of August 13th, well, they had actually spoken about separating before that. So there's really no reason to wake up early and have that discussion. It also turned out that they'd spoken about, getting a realtor and moving somewhere else previously as well. So that conversation was also unnecessary to have early in the morning for the first time. The way Chris Watts frames it is as though that's the first time they spoke about those things, when it really wasn't. And so what was also quite strange with all that was, at the same time that you're sort of aware that there was this, things weren't going so well, Shanann was nevertheless continuing to sell the Thrive fairy tale on Facebook. Point number 89 is kind of pretty easy to miss, that Nicole Atkinson, I think, told ABC News that she'd entertained the idea, that's a quote from her, or that Shanann had entertained the idea that Chris may have been unfaithful because he wasn't being the loving Chris that he normally was. He wasn't touching or hugging or doing stuff like that. He wasn't being as attentive to the girls either as he normally is. And that's something Nicole Atkinson said very early on. Chris Watts' friends described him to the Daily Beast as reserved, smart, and gentle, and a man known to get along with anyone. And, in the beginning, that really didn't mean anything to any of us, because a lot of people in a situation like that are described as nice. And, this is the kindest person you've ever met in your life. They wouldn't harm a fly. And so statements like that aren't very helpful, but it was nevertheless an indication of what kind of person we were dealing with. This was the other face of Chris Watts, right? I think point number 99 is quite interesting. I'm not going to read it here. You can go and check that out in the blog post. Number 102 deals with Linda Biggers, a realtor who listed Shanann's home, who told the Daily Beast that she thought the couple moved because Chris got a job out west that's moved from North Carolina. Bear in mind, Shanann had quite a big house in North Carolina, which they moved out of. And then Linda Biggers said, I think she wanted to get married and move to Colorado with him. The house was hers, it wasn't his. She just had a really beautiful home. It was beautifully furnished. And then point number 103, Shanann King hurried to sell her residence and left furniture behind as part of the sale, the buyer told the Associated Press. A deed for the house was signed in August 2012 while Shanann was living in Colorado, property records show. Then there's a photo of Shanann as a youngster playing tennis. You get a sense of, who she was, her backstory, between points 104 and 105. Point 109 deals with something Shanann said in March. This is from her Facebook in March 2018. She said she had 2 hours of sleep last night. She couldn't sleep. She had a lot on her mind with girls' surgery today. So it sort of makes you wonder, what was she thinking? What was she going through before things went the way that they did? And I think it's a question worth asking. And once again, you've got to ask yourself, are you someone who likes exaggeration? Do you like drama? Do you like other people to be very dramatic? Or do you like things to be the way they are? Do you like to know the facts, the actual information? So if you ask a question like, in terms of the affair, did the affair happen because of Nicole Kessinger? Is it Nicole Kessinger's fault that the affair happened? Or is it the fact that the marriage wasn't going very well that the affair happened, right? And I think a reasonable answer to that question is both. I think Nicole Kessinger certainly didn't help. She was pursuing him, right? But I don't think she's the sole reason for the affair. I think if Chris Watts was happily married, then I'm not sure if he would have been interested in an affair. The other thing is, there were other things that were sort of tearing at him. The bankruptcy that they were going through, there was a bankruptcy in 2015, and then they were facing once again serious financial problems in 2018. And I don't know about you, but if you've ever been in a relationship with someone where there's serious financial problems, or you've ever been in a marriage with someone, it's a cause of a lot of acrimony. It may not be one person's fault necessarily or another person's fault necessarily, but there's nevertheless a lot of unhappiness because of constantly struggling and being frustrated and dealing with certain things that just won't go away. And that just leads to an unhappy scenario, doesn't it? And so if someone emerges on the periphery that is kind of doesn't have those financial problems, it can be an outlet, it can be escape, it can be just a sense that, of getting out, even just psychologically, of kind of an unpleasant situation filled with unpleasant conversations. Does that make sense? I do get the sense that a lot of people blame Nicole Kessinger. If Nicole Kessinger didn't come along, Chris Watts and Shanann would have lived happily ever after. I find that just very naive and fragmented way of thinking, because the marriage was sort of on the rocks in a way as well. They admitted it. That's why they had the third child, was to try and save their marriage. I don't think that was a very good strategy for trying to do that. And I think what eventually happened demonstrates that. Don't you agree? And then the final point I'm going to highlight is number 111, and that's from June 15th, where Shanann posted on Facebook, Chris just said he's been more talkative since he started Burn, talking to random strangers, # he's an introvert. So even Shanann described his quite unusual personality with that particular word. And I know I've kind of highlighted it, but it's not a very fancy word. It doesn't have that zing to it that certain other words have. And so people may feel like, I'd rather have something that's more exaggerated, that gives me a sense of how evil Chris Watts is. And is that true, though? You might feel, this is an extreme scenario, it's this extreme incident that happened, so I need some kind of extreme definition of this person. He's got to have some really bizarre disorder, otherwise, he surely can't be just an ordinary person. But I find this happens a lot in true crime, and I understand the human psychology behind it, but it's just, once again, an exaggeration. When you have these despicable crimes and these despicable criminals, people have a immediate tendency to try and exaggerate, to say these people are monsters, but they're not. They're men. And that's the most frightening thing about them. And I actually found that exact quote from The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold, saying, these aren't monsters, they're men. And that's the most frightening part. And I think a lot of people try to convince themselves and soothe themselves that I'm nothing like Chris Watts, and my situation is nothing like the Watts family, and et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's more of an authentic story to say, well, there are a lot of things that are very similar. This keeping up of appearances, this fixation of social media, this being totally distracted on your phone, this problem with debt and moneylessness. And I don't think the Chris Watts case is so popular and so interesting because these people are nothing like us. I think it's the opposite. I think that postcard, that picture-perfect postcard, is something that, in a weird way, is something that speaks about all of us. We're all trying to pursue a fairy tale, and to some extent we're all caught up in some kind of frustrating nightmare or really difficult period. And how do we deal with it? How do we try to escape it? And so from there, the whole What Else Do We Know archive goes into September and further. And so, as I say, if you're interested in going through that, then you're welcome to do that. It's free to access on the Shakedown title blog. As I say, I've got a link in the description. If you want it narrated to you, you can also play the playlist of 23 episodes, so check those out. So I'm not going to take it further than that. In episode 9, we're going to look at some of the coverage provided by Ashley Banfield, where people went back to the Sermon on the Porch. But bear in mind, very early on, this was August the 24th, so just 11 days after everything happened. What were we looking at? What body language clues stood out 11 days after the incident? So if you're interested in that, if you're interested in, again, how we see how our thinking evolved and how it changed, perhaps how it didn't change, if you're interested in that and you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, please do. You can click on the light blue icon on the bottom right, like, share, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys next time.